Continuing education knows that at the end, students want to graduate, and we can help them do that because we take the time to really listen to their needs and we understand all the different options that are available across the campus for them.
We don't take a cookie cutter approach. We realize each student comes with their own story. So whether it's a part-time student looking to complete a degree program or someone just looking for online courses, we're there to connect them to the resources of the university.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Frank Melville. I am an entrepreneur 50 years ago, and then I became just a normal business person because of the success of that entrepreneurial effort in hospitality technology, right down the street in Broomfield. I'm delighted to be here today. There are a couple things I have to say. Okay, are you ready? Here we go. My name is Frank Melville. For recording purposes, today is Thursday, April 10th, 2025. It's 10:30 a.m. This is panel number 18153, and the title is The Tipping Point, How Much is Too Much? Before we get started, the University of Colorado Boulder, Colorado's flagship university, honors and recognizes the many contributions of indigenous peoples in our state. CU Boulder acknowledges that it is located on traditional territories and ancestral homelands of Cheyenne, Arapaho, Ute, and many other Native American nations. Their forced removal from these territories has caused devastating and lasting impacts. While the University of Colorado Boulder can never undo or rectify the devastation wrought on indigenous peoples, we commit it to improving and enhancing engagement with indigenous peoples and issues locally and globally. We will do this by recognizing and amplifying the voices of indigenous CU Boulder students, staff, and faculty and their work, educating, conducting research, supporting student success, and integrating indigenous knowledge, and consulting, engaging, and working collaboratively with tribal nations to enhance our ability to provide access and culturally sensitive support and to recruit, retain, and graduate Native American students in a climate that is inclusive and respectful. Okay, one other thing I want to talk about, and that is that we want to make sure you get a chance to ask questions. Here's how we're going to handle that if you haven't been here before. At the end of the session, we'll reserve time for Q&A. We're using a note card system rather than raising hands and asking questions. So we'll receive questions from the audience on note cards. Anytime during the session, just raise your hand, and one of the producers who you can see in the back there will bring you a card and a little pencil. If you're a student, please write that you're a student somewhere obvious on the card, and write legibly. Be concise as you possibly can. When you're finished writing your card, raise your hand, and the producers will come pick it up and bring it up here. Urge everyone to please make your questions brief and to the point. And now, let's get started. We're delighted to have you here as we dive into a topic that's increasingly on everybody's minds and, of course, affecting our wallets, the evolving culture of tipping. I'm sure we've all recently found ourselves unsure whether we should tip or not at a counter, or you feel a little pressured by some digital prompts at checkouts. I know I have. And you're not alone. Tipping has expanded well beyond the traditional hospitality settings. It's influencing everything from our morning routines to social interactions. The shift raises compelling questions. How does this trend affect the businesses and employees? How about us as consumers? Are we supporting fair compensation or inadvertently creating unfair economic and social pressure? Today, the panel will explore these issues, unpacking the economic implications, consumer behavioral changes, and industry dynamics shaped by modern tipping practices. How'd you like that? Since I'm a dad, I have to say this. Have we reached a tipping point with tipping? So let's get started. All right, I'm going to introduce the panels, and then just a quick introduction, and if you'd like to say a few words, please do. Rebekah Hill is a partner at Heidrick & Struggles in Houston.
Here, but officially Houston, yes.
Okay. Specializing in senior level executive and executive board searches across the energy industry, and that includes renewable and chemical energy. Her extensive experience includes executive coaching and leadership development, meaning she's skilled at finding talent and politely telling people how they can improve. With an early career at PricewaterhouseCoopers and a deep background in finance, Rebekah truly knows how to balance the books in the boardroom.
Oh, and now.
Yes.
So I am not on this panel for anything you just said. My other two panels, yes, I brought expertise to. I would say a couple things as to why I'm on this panel. So when I was in college, I was an economics major. I studied econometrics, which is really the statistics side of it. I wrote my thesis on who are the best tippers. I paid for college by waiting tables, so I've waited tables for years. So I had two friends that with me kept data for 9 months in 3 different types of restaurants, and we published who were the best tippers. It got picked up by NPR and Delta Skylines magazine, and at 22 years old, I got to get interviewed as if I was a PhD economist, which felt incredibly fun. So what I bring to this table is that I eat out a lot. I paid for college by waiting tables. My 2 daughters through high school worked in restaurants and the service industry. They're now in college. But that's what I bring to this, and I think it is a really valuable skill set, which you will see here to my left, that I think I will probably be the most valuable member of this panel. And I thank you for having me here today.
That was great. Thank you, Rebekah. Matija Goljar.
Hey guys.
He's an entrepreneur, an educator, and a media personality from Slovenia who once dreamed of being an astronaut but settled for launching startups instead. Is that right? Less gravity, fewer helmets. Known for creating Eastern Europe's acclaimed entrepreneurship education program, which is called...
Ustvarjalnik.
Yeah,
Thanks for not trying to pronounce it. Yeah.
Matija has inspired thousands of young entrepreneurs across 6 countries. He's also the charismatic host of Slovenia's reality show, Start It Up, Slovenia, and spends his free time exploring Europe in his camper van, which proves even entrepreneurs can be nomads. Go ahead.
Is this my cue to start talking?
It
Okay.
is.
So in Slovenia, I usually say, hey, I'm the capitalist bastard. But in this country, as you can see, I've been placed on the far left. Maybe that tells a little bit about the differences in our society. But instead of me talking about myself, how cool I am, pertinent to this particular discussion, let me just say this. We're a country of 2 million people. And of course, there's not going to be a fintech provider to create our own local, stuff on the iPad where you place your tips. So we use the American one. You know what happens whenever somebody actually has that iPad thing pop up? The waiter apologizes and deliberately goes click, 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 0, cancel, and sorry, please don't do that. So I assume I need to be the lefty of this panel and basically charge the whole premise of the tipping. I'm not going to go into more detail because there's going to be questions later. But for now, I'm just going to say, this is really icky.
We could have a whole panel on what Americans have done to the European tipping culture, couldn't we?
I mean, if you come and pay for the tips, we'll take the money. But you know what? That doesn't mean it's right.
Thank you, Matija. Okay, Carl Quintanilla is an Emmy and Peabody Award-winning CNBC anchor. He's celebrated for his dynamic reporting on global events like the Olympics and Hurricane Katrina. He's a CU Boulder alumnus, and Carl has covered major stories around the world with journalistic precision. And guess not today, the tie always perfectly tied. Not today, huh? He's co-anchored of CNBC's Squawk on the Street and has contributed to the NBC Today Show as well as NBC Nightly News. Most notably, though, Carl moderated a CU Boulder Republican presidential debate, and somehow he managed to keep order despite it being full of politicians. How many people were there? Like 4?
I think, well, the number of candidates, I think, might have been 6, because it was Cruz, Trump, Christie. I'd prefer to forget it, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
But no, I'm glad to be here. I wanted to ask, actually, before we got started, how many in the room have ever had to work for tips? All right, that's interesting. I think that's why it's such a great behavioral economic debate. I mean, it really depends on your experience. There's a level of empathy in there. I think when you're at the counter, it's not by any means a pure rational economic decision. You're not trying to efficiently price out the level of service that you got. You're either trying to help a person you think may be underpaid, or maybe you're feeling judged and there is an element of guilt at the checkout counter. I do think we should talk at some point about the point you were getting to, Frank, and that is it is transferring the responsibility for living wage from the employer to fellow consumers, because it's so easy for employers increasingly to say, hey, there's tips, I don't need to pay as much.
Okay, Pete did not bring any energy into the room at all this morning. Pete's the owner of Boulder Taqueria.
Tiaco.
I thought that was it. Okay. He's deeply committed to both tasty tacos and community advocacy, because who says you can't save the world one taco at a time? Over the past 13 years, he's championed fair wages practice, and in fact, he's going to be speaking today at the Colorado Senate, and I'm sure we'll hear about that regarding tipping. And policies for benefiting restaurant owners and staff alike. He's also the founder of Ruthie's Boardwalk Social, and has a practical, balanced approach, which makes him a trusted voice and chef for positive change within Boulder's thriving food scene. Pete?
Thank you. Carl stole my notes, so I'm not going to ask anybody to lift their hands again, but I am going to turn my phone to the side. Yeah, so I'm probably representing a slightly different group here. As Frank pointed out, we've been operating Tiaco for 13 years here in Boulder. When we started, minimum wage was somewhere in between $7 and $8 an hour. We're now at $15.50, and we've kind of been put in this awkward tug-of-war situation between staff, guests, and all the other costs that come along with operating a restaurant. And here I am walking a tightrope while spinning plates and juggling chainsaws some mornings. So I'm really excited to kind of hear what the rest of the panel has to say. I encourage anybody who doesn't like what I have to say and join the masses and give us a 1-star review tomorrow morning. My skin's pretty thick at this point, but anyway, very excited to be here. Thank you to the host. Thank you to CU. Thank you to our production team. And I'm looking forward to the rest of the next hour here. Thank you, guys.
Great. Well, I have a leading question, unless anybody wants to just kick off with additional thoughts, which I'm not going to let you do. And Pete, I really want to get back to that. We're going to do that. But for a lead-in, everyone here has probably felt that awkward moment, right, at a checkout. Whether it's at a coffee or a place where you didn't expect it at all. This is why we're here. Is the tipping culture spinning out of control? Are we just becoming more aware of a value in service, or is it a shift? What do you think in 30 seconds or less? No.
I can keep time. Don't worry. No, I think historically, if you think about the history of tipping, it was fairly predictable. The instance in which you were asked to decide about tips, right? A doorman at a hotel, certainly getting the check at the restaurant. You knew you were going to have to make a decision about a gratuity. Now, it's not always. It's sometimes increasingly a surprise. Really? There's an iPad here at this coffee shop too. It's often a rush decision. There's people behind you. You got to make up your mind. What am I paying? So that adds, I think, to the level of stress. I mean, I just think about the impact of the iPad. You'd put this toward the top of the list, the way it's changed the retail experience. Mm-hmm. So I think it's that increasing sort of volatility in the decision making that makes tipping so controversial.
Let's go all the way to the left.
Oh. That you're crazy? No, on a serious note, and meaning no disrespect, obviously cultural differences are important, but let me just give this as a perspective from somebody on the other side. Tipping is not a phenomenon that happened on itself. At best, I see it as a symptom of a more systemic issue. And that is the question of labor laws. That is the question of consumer protection laws. Coming from a humble, poor country, let me give you a plastic example. Carl, on the far right, is doing very similar what I'm doing in my country. Per capita, I think our viewership base is pretty much the same. Yeah, so, same thing. That guy is super rich. My GDP per capita puts me in a position 10x less, right? But here's the trick. I would argue that my quality of life is just as good. And why I'm saying this, I was born with a congenital heart disease. I had to have open heart surgery when I was 3 months old. The state paid for it in 1987. I'm fine, I'm good. I had to see the doctors, you know how expensive something like that could happen. Never once was I considering, should I get health care? Should I not? Should I skip the doctor's appointment? Parents never cared about that. The whole panel here paid for their education, probably more than my high school has a budget for one whole year. I would honestly argue my education is not worse. I'm well-traveled, well-educated, read all the books. And I'm not trying to now say how my country is good and your country is bad. Well, maybe a tiny bit, but that's not the point here, really. The good and the bad. The extremes in America are really beautiful. A man on the moon, the technological innovation. But then again, I also have to tell you, I see poor children begging on the streets in the subways of New York. That is what happens, and it's a normal trade-off, and we can talk about the political decision, whether that's good or whether that's bad. But talking about tipping, let me just say this. It is also something beautiful that happens where you see, you know, people understanding that the server is not paid enough and we contribute. It shows that even though the system as such may be a little bit wacky, we feel the human dignity to help out. And that's basically a parallel system setting up all on its own to solve a societal ill. And that societal ill at the end of the day is that if somebody does honest job, there should be honest pay, right? My beloved Hannah there, when she was a student, her minimum salary as a student was 7.2 euro. What, that's about 8 euros? $8? I don't think that is a minimum salary that, you know, is actually lower than many countries here. And considering the GDP, wow, quality of life gets up when we have a systemic system in place, you know, that kind of helps stuff out. So I would like to challenge you, well, with a provocative question. It's not only tipping, it's much broader. And it's not only the server who is in a position to be one-on-one, to make you feel bad awkwardly, hey, please give me the money. What about all the hundreds of people behind the server who never interact with the customer? They're also paid very bad. They also do stuff nearly for free. And to put it completely practically, I'm going to ask Rebekah a challenge. This tip jar basically says, tips for Rebekah.
Absolutely.
Rebekah, how
over.
much money is going to go to them?
100%.
How much money is going to go to the servers, to the producers? For
Right.
that matter,
I've
for us.
I made that, right? I made that deal earlier this morning and last night, and you only asked for 10%. And I said, sold. And you just undersold yourself. We had that at the dinner last night. Xander said 10%, and I was like, I'm going to help you negotiate your first salary coming out of college. Frank, in answer to your question, has it changed? Absolutely, it's changed, right? All of us don't need any expertise. I don't need to own a restaurant to know that it's changed. Technology has changed every industry that we touch right now. I would say the thing for me that has changed the most is I think I felt like I knew how people were compensated in the industry before. I think, and whether I was right or wrong, I felt like I knew kind of how that was done and where my tips went and how much they were of someone's salary. I guess I felt like I knew that. Now I don't, right? So if I get an unexpected one, which is not like in a restaurant, which I would expect, but something out of the blue, like you said, I'm like, wait a minute, how is this person paid? How much is a tip? Is this really just on top of it? So I take the shuttle at the airport, right, to park outside because it's cheaper. How much is that gentleman being paid because it says tips appreciated at the top? I think for me, that's what's changed. I like knowing the data behind it, and whether I fooled myself if I knew it or not, I feel like I don't know, and I ask now. And I like to know. So when I have on a restaurant menu and it says, we have a shared pooled system, right? So a restaurant I just went to 2 days ago, it said up front, We have a shared pooled system our tips go to, and it said in the back, in the front, right? Like it said it, and I think some people think that's rude, right? Or they take it a certain way. I loved it. I loved that I came back feeling knowledgeable as to how much my tip went and who it went to. So in answer to your question, of course it's changed, and it feels dramatically different. I think for me, I don't know about you guys, but when I'm surprised, that's the main thing. I'm like, oh, we're tipping here. Oh, do I have cat? So that's why I also provided Venmo and cash for you, because you want to make sure that everything is an option.
So how much do I get?
You get 5%.
And you?
I get none.
Okay.
I'm paid a fair living
And
wage.
Xander right there is 10%. He should have negotiated better.
Pete, you live in this.
Yeah.
Tell
I
us
die in
from
this
your.
is actually the
Okay,
correct
all right.
statement.
With your 1 stars, yeah.
So let me first start off by saying everybody's right, and that's the problem with this situation. If I were to come with my own prop today, it would be an enormous tube of toothpaste that said tips on it, and it would be blown out across this entire table because we're not getting it back in. And if COVID didn't do it, there is no way we're going to find a way today to reverse this model, in my opinion. In my lifetime, let's just call it, or my working lifetime, which is getting shorter by the day. So as I see
I'm
it,
3/4 done, by the way. Go ahead.
I look really good for my age, Frank. So we've created this beast, and as you alluded to earlier, it's a runaway train, and now everybody's jumping on that train, right? Everybody's like, hey, this is a great way to offset some wages in an inflationary time, and we're just, the people who once relied on this as a livable wage, to your point, Rebekah, these people are the ones that are now being watered down and diluted by everybody saying, I'm just going to put a tip jar around my neck. It looks good on you, Rebekah, but
Thank
to
you. Thank
our
you.
earlier points,
Thank
like,
you.
it really is confusing. And is it just like, hey, are we deflating our dollar? Like, is the dollar worth 20% less because everything that cost $1 expects to be paid out at 120? You know, we've got to take all this into consideration. And for me, the biggest challenge is trying to figure out how to compensate our back of house and our front of house when the front of house may be making a significant amount of tips. And in no way am I comfortable with anybody not having their needs met. I'm not going to get into the definition of minimum versus livable and how that all changes for people, but I will point out that one of the things we do at our restaurant is we have an ability to take care of people when they're in need. And this isn't me looking for handouts here, but there's different ways to compensate people. And there's a paycheck, and that's great, and money makes the world go round, but there's the ability to hand off 60 pounds of pork to one of my employees when they want to throw a party for their family. And when somebody has medical bills that need coverage, we can step in, we buy plane tickets, to send people home to see family in times of need. Compensation, in my opinion, should be so much greater than the check. And I have, proud to say, some of the greatest retention in restaurants in town. 25% of my kitchen staff's been with me since day one, 13 years ago. We kept every single employee entirely through COVID. And yeah, we're here for them at the end of the day, and we're just trying to figure this out. As I said earlier, it's a tightrope for us to walk. So I think I did an amazing job of not answering your question.
Well,
and, probably leading on to a few more.
It does lead in, because we talked a little bit about long-term effects of the tipping culture and the front of house, back of house disparity. You addressed the current. What do you think about the future? What's going to be the long term on this? And that touches on a student question, but go ahead.
Sure. And some quick background. The IRS is very particular about who can make tips and who qualifies as tips. I've always, since I worked in restaurants making tips, to me it was a commission. You do your job right and you're going to make 20% of whatever you sell. And yes, you have to share some of that with support staff that help you operate, but I always viewed it as a commission. The harder I worked, the more opportunity for me to earn, and that's why I enjoyed being on that side of it. Right now, most restaurants pay a flat hourly fee to their kitchen staff, and then the tipped minimum wage to their front of house staff, and then they share the tips in some way, shape, or form. So what we're seeing is every time I have to raise my menu prices to keep up with inflation, the tip, if you pay 20% on $10 versus 20% on $11, the front of house is in some ways getting a raise, you know, and they're tracking with inflation to some extent as it directly relates to my menu prices. When I have a server, let's say, that's making a significant amount in tips, and I use the word significant without revealing their pay because they're not here today, and the government says, okay, we're going to move minimum wage up $1, that server automatically gets a raise. And if I'm paying my kitchen staff $5, $6, $7 above minimum wage, they're not required by law to get that raise. So I'm stuck in a point where I go, the guy who's already out earning you significantly gets the dollar on January 1, and I need to figure out how to get $1 for you in the back of house without inflating my prices, which make the raise irrelevant in the next phase of life. And the cycle continues itself, and that's where we're going right now. And I know that as soon as we do away with tipping, your prices go up because you don't pay sales tax on that 20%. If I have to increase my prices by 20% and go to a fair wage where everybody makes an even hourly, the customer's getting the short end of the stick because they're the ones that are now, a $10 meal isn't costing them, you're getting taxed on $12, not 10. And so obviously the government likes that, and they're going to steer us in that direction wherever they can. Labor unions can only collect dues on pay, not tips. So they like that. So we're getting all these external forces that are trying to steer a traditional tip model in, and then you throw in everybody who's got an iPad that can create a tip screen, like
Flip it over.
yeah. Oh, you don't even flip it over. Go to GoFundMe. I want to make a donation, and they're asking for a 20% gratuity. That's, I think I've talked enough today, but if I haven't upset anybody, please raise your hand, and I'll make a point to single you out going forward. So, thank you.
Pretty clear we're not going to unpack this today. I said we were going to unpack this. I don't think we are. Carl, tell us, do you think that all this digital revolution with tipping is accelerating things, or is it having no impact and just making tipping easier?
Oh, well, it's obviously made tipping easier. I mean, I would take a step back and remember that relative to other developed economies, we are a service economy, right? It's 2/3 of our economy. So this conversation naturally is going to get elevated relative to other economies. I would take the whole issue about whether or not it's a reflection of our societal ills and, you know, wealth inequality. I would kind of flip it a bit and say that tipping, when I think of tipping, like in the old days, I think of like the shoe shine guy, right? Like, of course you're going to tip the shoe shine guy. No one gets their shoes shined at a shine stand anymore. But I think it's a uniquely, if not American, a uniquely Western sign of respect. And I think that's what makes it, you know, kind of admirable. I was a busboy at the Denver Marriott when I was a student here, and I mean, I know what it's like trying to work the wait staff to get them to share their nightly tips with you, and that made me a better busboy. I mean, I watered the tables like mad because I was trying to get the waiters to share with the goods at the end of the day. And that, I think, feeds right into a whole discussion about American, productivity, you know, energy, innovation. It made me a better employee. And that might get lost a bit.
I think did anyone know anything about the IRS and how they handle tips, like when Peter was talking? Does anyone have any knowledge of that? One, fantastic. Two, right, how things are treated differently. Ask questions. Like, ask those questions. Come in. I mean, the reason I did is my daughter was, she worked on a golf cart this summer, selling beer to people playing golf. And then I just had to help her with her taxes last week. And she was like, why did this wasn't tips. So we had to go back. We had to go to her actual employer and say that this wasn't tips. So I learned all of this. It is actually fascinating. And I think also gives some grace to Peter and other employee, restaurant owners that are having to balance all of these things, just like everything in every panel that I've been on. Go deeper, ask questions, make yourself knowledgeable on it. Ask your kids those questions, ask your grandkids those questions, right? Get them knowledgeable as well. I think you come into discussions like this, and also you're less judgmental on things when you come in knowledgeable. And it doesn't take that long to get familiar with it.
That's good.
Yeah, thank you.
Matija,
Yes?
are we crazy capitalist Americas? Right next door is AI as your boyfriend or girlfriend. Are we crazy Americans going to start tipping AI robots?
You probably will. I mean, that's a good question and a fine point, but on a very pragmatic way, listen, I love the idea of capitalism. I wouldn't be here and I wouldn't do what I do without all the new creation that is happening. But I want to be cognizant of the fact that, to your point, Carl, the majority of the economy is in the service sector, not in the high-tech, new, big startup creation sector. In those types of economies and in those types of jobs, for you to come up with a new innovation, for example, a new place on Pearl Street that sells some cute, small, artsy stuff, right? For somebody to be able to come up with this new idea, that person needs time, or I don't know, Virginia Woolf says a room of her own or something like that, right? But the point here being is, if you are making ends meet, living from today to tomorrow, not being able to breathe, not being able to get out of the school loans that are happening right now, that part of innovation is gone. And I would like to challenge back, there is a balance, right? Full capitalism is bad, full communism is bad. We all know that there is a level of middle ground. In a concrete example, the biggest tech company in Slovenia that actually produces instrumentation technologies, first for NASA, now for SpaceX, the founders decided that it would be a good idea to give every employee stocks, not just stock options, but actual co-ownership. And when we are talking about compensation, that is obviously on top of a very good, competitive, safe, stable salary. And I would like to return this ball back. I would like to return this ball back to you by saying, if somebody in my part of the world would hear, hey, we're compensated well because we're given 60 pounds of pork, brother of God, you would be kicked out of the room.
How do I ask for equity up here? Like if you have stocks you want to transfer to me, I'm not quite sure how I do that, but I'm going to send a text right now, and by the end of this panel, I will have something else up here for you.
Oh, gosh.
So that would be great. That's a genius.
That was good. Pete, curious, sorry, I lost my card here. I'm carefully working these questions in without anyone knowing because I think they're better than what I have written down here. But you think about tipping with something like Uber Eats. And if you look at Amazon delivery, they get no tip. If I ride in an Uber, I don't know, 10%-ish is what most people I know do. And then all of a sudden Uber Eats, it's 20%. Talk about that. Why are we so different in those three different but very similar
Yeah, I
situations?
think
Sorry, I butchered your question.
And we currently aren't using any third-party delivery systems at the moment, but we have used them in the past, trying to limp through COVID, not as a revenue maker, but just as a way to reach our guests in a time when we couldn't make that connection and somebody else was willing to step in and do it. So those dollars for Uber Eats go directly to the driver, not to the restaurant,
Right.
which I think the reason they get away with it is because people are accustomed to tipping for food from a restaurant. And to Rebekah's earlier point, nobody understands entirely how those tips are distributed. And I was thinking in the back of my head earlier how Amazon, well, their labor practices aren't the most popular in the country. They haven't gone to the tip thing yet, so you got to give them a small little credit right there. Like I said, I'll figure out a way to upset everybody in this room by the end of the day. But yeah, I did find it interesting just a few minutes ago as it kind of crossed my mind that's the one thing Amazon seems to be doing correct these days. In terms of Uber drivers, I think taxi drivers, we've kind of tipped forever, right? You're
Yep.
a New York guy.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I think it kind of comes back to what we were talking about earlier, is that there are these original shoe shine guys, valets, food industry, where people have been tipping forever. And if you find an opportunity to deliver that food, naturally it's already ingrained in people's heads that they're going to be more accustomed to tip 20% because of the product being delivered. I don't think you would deliver, I don't know, you can get other stuff from Uber, right? You can
Yep.
have them like
Sure.
pick up shampoo or something for
Mouthwash,
you.
sure.
Mouthwash. Do you think
What are you
those?
saying?
It'll be delivered in 6 minutes.
Yeah, I'm guessing they don't tip as much for mouthwash delivery, but
Probably not.
yeah. So I think it's ingrained in our minds that we're willing to tip for certain services and products, and that's, everybody wants to get a piece of that. So yeah, why wouldn't you deliver food if your driver's just picking up a bag? If what's in it delivers you 20% more, I think you'd be all about picking up food before groceries per se.
I think you ask questions. When I get in an Uber, I ask how they're compensated. I was like, how long have you been driving for Uber? Well, I've been driving for 6 years. I was like, tell me how it works. And so I actually, on my drivers, they're like, so how much, he's like, how much did you get charged for this? And I said, it's looking like this. And he's like, I got paid $16.50 for that. And I was like, huh. Like, I am not embarrassed anymore to ask questions on how things work. I think in the beginning I was. I'm not, and it's not rude, and if they don't want to answer me, they don't have to answer me about their compensation. But if they want to have a discussion about it, I find it really helpful to be more knowledgeable. And so I don't feel bad asking questions anymore.
Well, Uber is a great example because driver retention is actually one of their fiercest headwinds, keeping drivers working. And Tia and I were on a panel yesterday, talked a lot about the gig economy and what that's done for job security. But I mean, if it's such an urgent issue for Uber, you would think they would respond with comp. But no, they have totally identified the cultural tailwind of a tipping culture and are trying to ride that wave. What I find most sort of disingenuous is when they add a delivery charge, right, or service fee. That's a structured fee for delivery, and then ask for a tip on top of that. Is the driver getting no piece of that delivery fee? Wait, what's the added cost in boxing it for delivery? That always confuses me.
All right, we're going to do a lightning round. Because I'm
Fast
inundated
answers.
with cars. Yeah. How does tipping a server differ from tipping a street performer? 20 seconds.
How is tipping a server different?
From tipping a street performer.
Well, a server, you asked for the service. You didn't ask for a street performer to come and entertain you, so it's a bit more of a passive structure than going to a restaurant and then expecting, you're making a trade. I want service, I'll compensate you in return. The street performer is trying to force that service on you.
All right, teed up. Oh, you want to answer the same one? Go ahead.
1099. Yeah.
The IRS.
Yeah, that's yeah. The street performer is an independent contractor. Yeah.
Which is the next question? Should tips be taxed? Lightning round.
No.
No, they're a gift.
Who shouldn't? You
I'm not the
tip?
person to answer.
Who shouldn't you tip?
Who shouldn't I tip?
Who shouldn't
An
you tip?
owner.
No.
Like if I get my hair cut, if it's the owner, no.
Carl, because she's already rich.
Don't tip Carl. Carl, I'm not saying that. I'm going to put your tip
You don't
jar
have
out
to
there
tip,
for
no, it's
you.
okay. I've worked for tips in the past. I'm not saying.
Sorry. Are tips degrading to an individual?
Yes.
Absolutely not.
Yes, and here's my
I
point.
knew this was going to be.
No, here's my point. And I'm going to be humble and return to what Carl said, which I absolutely agree with. The shoe shine guy, the taxi driver, the street performer. You decide to give something extra. And the word here is extra. Tips inherently are not degrading. But in this country, where it's not extra, but to make ends meet, sadly to say, yes, it is very, very bad.
Absolutely not.
I like the distinction.
Yeah, I work a lot I chose a job where I get compensated on production, and I think I learned that as a 13-year-old starting work, and it makes me a better employee. It makes me a more efficient employee, and I didn't find it degrading, and I would say no.
So how do we compare that efficiency to an Amazon driver who doesn't have time to go to the restroom? Not surviving, not going to the restroom, that seems like a very bad deal.
Should be pay balance.
Should we what?
There should be pay. There should be pay equity. I think they're
Oh,
paid
right. Yes.
well compared to an Uber
Of course,
driver, right?
yes.
Rebecca, someone really liked what you were saying and just wants to know, do you still always tip after you have these conversations? Or is there ever a conversation, you have the conversation and after the conversation, you lower your tip?
Oh, I do lower my tip. Based on when I learn how someone is compensated, absolutely. I change my tip depending on that. I take that data into account.
Carl, what are your thoughts on, have you had this happen when a restaurant requests a tip before you've even been served? Have you ever had that happen? This is an interesting question.
Wait. You sit down and they say in advance?
It could be on the menu, right? It says we charge a 20%. Maybe
Oh,
that's what they mean?
Maybe that's what's
Maybe
meant.
that's what they
Right.
mean?
I would say it has created this weird environment where there's a baseline expectation that there will be some tipping going on, but it does give you a little leverage to disincentivize bad service, right? When service is bad and you tip less or not at all, I think it's turned that into a more powerful statement.
So the irony is that tips were, and I'm going back here, but it was to improve performance, right? That was the goal, tipping was done in advance of the service. It was a tip box that you would put a coin in at a coffee shop or at perhaps a front desk. And so you would actually tip to encourage good service, not as in response to good service. So yeah, it was to improve performance or something, yeah.
But in advance.
But in advance, if you think about it, it's like you'd order your coffee, and we still do it in coffee shops, right? We pay in advance of a coffee.
So what you're saying, first it
Interesting.
was a bribe, now it's a tip.
No, not at all. It's still a bribe. Yeah, it's still a bribe.
My friend, that's
still
kind of
is.
effed up.
Yeah. Well, that's called repeat business. Yeah. And that's the reality of it is people are coming back and you're going to tip more to the place you go to on a regular basis because you want to be taken care of
Absolutely.
that next visit. If you're traveling out of town, I guarantee you're not holding the same standards as the person who makes your bagel every morning or your coffee and New York City is notorious for that. You
Yeah.
walk down the street and your cart's waiting for your morning experience.
What do you think, what does it say that these attempts, by Danny Myers, a restaurateur, they tried to move off the tipping model and it didn't work? Why is that?
It's a good question.
It's because you need everybody to do it at once, right? It's become such an industry norm, and it's a way that society acts. And Danny Meyer, for those that don't know, is one of the greatest restaurateurs and potentially human beings of our time. And he came up with this elaborate system on how people can get paid equally, and they all just go, you know what, I can make more money at the place next door with tips. And so they all left. And this great restaurateur, hospitalitarian, was left with a diminishing staff, and he had to cut bait and go back to the traditional model. So if we didn't do it when the world shut down during COVID, that was, for once in our lifetime, we had all the planes in the world on the ground. We're never going to have that opportunity again, so I don't see the evolution taking place. It's just too much carnage to get there.
Toothpaste.
Yep.
Too much toothpaste out
but-
on the table.
Humbly, why so pessimistic? I understand to quote Cynthia Erivo, it's a wicked problem. It really is. But let me remind you something. Seeing as an outsider this beautiful city and this beautiful culture, there is one thing that America did that nobody else in the world has come close. And it was a super difficult problem that I personally thought it was unsolvable. Smoking here is considered the biggest no-no on the planet. Almost nobody does it, right? It's a social stigma, it's a taboo. It's not even a discussion, and the young generation is not picking it up. Imagine how difficult it was that this happened societally. Everyone did it, right? And there's multiple factors that had to somehow coordinate, from the bad industry to the lobbyists to the research being done. And also on the other side to just, people teaching their kids that they can do better. Please, my friends, stop believing that it can't be done. I heard an opening statement, and I'm quoting, "Join the masses, give us a 1-star review." What revolution happened with a 1-star review? Come on. You can do better, you will do better, and I think someday you must do better.
Love it.
Okay, you can give me a 5-star review. That'll be acceptable tomorrow. Thank you.
How are we doing on time? 15 minutes? Is that right? Okay. Thank you. All right, so for everybody, a little bit of a shift here, but look forward 10 years. What does tipping look like 10 years from now? I think we just got sort of an answer of where we'd like to see it go from the left end of the table, but you get to start on this one too. I know it's rehashing a little bit.
Well,
10 years, what does tipping here actually look like 10 years from now?
I mean, nobody can predict the future, and I'm just, a humble guy from Slovenia who isn't really super well educated compared to all of you guys. The only comment here I would say is, picture 2 worldviews and 2 philosophies. On one side, you have the, let's say, Nordic, socialist-ish kind of approach. On the other side, you have this libertarian, Western American type of view. I think every time in history there is a sort of slow merge happening, for better or for worse. What I am seeing here is, well, let me go in a different direction and say, imagine Greenland has to vote whether to stay with Denmark or whether to go with USA, right? And the 40,000 people there with their historical baggage needs to make a choice. Imagine you are them and you need to decide. On one hand, you have the ability to become the richest person on the planet, the ability to have the freedom to do whatever, even if that includes carrying a gun wherever you go. On the other side, you have a system where school is free, where education is free, where everyone's taken care of, where if me and my beloved Hannah decides to have a baby, both of us get 1 year off paid by the government, and where basically the young generation, whatever they work, they know that somehow they are going to have a flat, not pay super rent, and live. Tipping, in this sense, is the tipping point where probably on our side of the planet, what's going to happen, we're going to see that we're living too well off and we're going to need to make cuts. But on this side of the world, tipping is now preventing a little bit of a societal collapse where I am super fearful if already now we have populists and fascists doing their stuff. If the economy drops another 10%, I have no idea, but I'm a little afraid. And I'll finish with this. I would never want to have children in this country. And I don't say it as a negative. I say it as a fact of reality where I already see back home in Slovenia, I know 10 families who decided to move and retire in our part of the world, not here, from Boulder, and Boulder's awesome.
I would relocate to have my children in the United States every day of the week, twice on Sunday. You asked me the question of in 10 years what it's going to look like. I think there are because of the economics of it, I think the 2 things I'm going to see, the person turning the iPad around to you is going to be much older or much younger. I think you're going to have the 2 ends of the spectrum that are coming in your service economy even more and less in the middle. I think that actually goes for an incredible amount of changes that would be a whole other panel for us to talk about there. I think that's number 1. I think also the total compensation of service workers is going to go more toward tips than, I think a greater percentage of their total compensation will be tips in 10 years. Those are the 2 changes I think will happen.
That's a good question. I think Rebekah should write a book so that we can all follow what to do. And I'm serious. I think you made a very amazing point earlier that we just don't know. And I think transparency would be amazing. I think it's probably here to stay in the traditional industries that we talked about earlier. I do think tip fatigue will get the better of the non-traditional tipped environments and people trying to get that. And I do think with the media today, podcasts, and how easily information is shared, I think it'd be really easy to kind of expose what pay structures exist in what industries, so you can have an expectation. I know NBC does a great job of doing this every Christmas season, like tip your mailman this and tip your hairstylist this, and I always kind of appreciated that there was a standard out there being set upon that we can at least live with some comfort and not shame. So I do think automation is going to take over a lot of these jobs that are currently tipped employees. 10 years from now, I think we're going to be living in a very different universe. So that's my.
That's such an important point. I think in 10 years we're going to be so awash in technology. You're not going to talk to customer service agents. You're going to talk to AI agents, and that's going to make human-to-human transactions seem kind of special. I think there'll be a bit of a novelty or a premium to you and I knowing that there's no tech here. It's just us, person to person. And that might actually feed that whole empathetic, behavioral, economic decision-making where you are more likely to give someone a tip.
Okay, I'm getting a lot of cards here, and there's some evil people out there who are seeing a little tinder and then a little spark and maybe a little fire, and you want to see something explode up here. I'm not reading some of these questions. That was a joke, but.
Read them. Just read them.
More lightning round stuff. Who is the tipping point for? Consumer, boss, or server? I mean, we talked about that a little bit, didn't we? Is there any future where people's feelings toward the increasing and ridiculous tips turn into a positive, and you're already there, where they're happy about it, but this is from us as the consumers, where we're willing, we just feel great about tipping. Is there a future where that's more ubiquitous, I think, is the question.
So we've often joked about having a section in the restaurant, unfortunately we're not big enough to physically do this, where it's only for people who have worked in the service industry. And when they come in and say, sorry, we're on a 1 hour wait, and they go, what about that table? And I go, oh, I'm really sorry, that's for somebody who's been down our road before. So,
I love it.
and I say that jokingly because, like I said, the restaurant's not big enough. But I see the empathy that I think you touched on earlier is that it does feel good. It does feel good to reward somebody. Like if I walked in and paid $25 for an experience and that's it, yes, verbal compliments are great, but it's empowering to be able to say, hey, you did an amazing job. Let me commend you for that work. And I think it's I'm probably going to get killed for this, but it's like giving to charity. Like it feels good to part with money in the right environment. And I think for somebody who's spent as much time and hours in this industry, for me, I see it as something that can potentially be empowering and positive. And there's a great book out there called Happy Money that I would highly recommend you take a look at since we don't have enough time to dive into today.
Well, before the panel, Rebekah, we were talking about an example you had thought of where someone had made either the customer laugh or smile or dressed up and the tips went up, right?
So my daughter worked at a nice ice cream store in Breckenridge through high school. Some of you may know it. So she is a chemical engineer, so she loves data, just getting that out there. So she would actually keep track on a spreadsheet of her tips of what made things go up and down. Do you guys know Princess Leia from Star Wars? And you know the buns that she puts in her hair? And she looks exactly like me, just better looking, smarter, and younger. So imagine me with the Princess Leia space buns. I think it was either 13 or 14% her tips went up with the Princess Leia space buns. An Avalanche jersey, 21% up.
What if it's game day? 50%?
That I don't know if we have that data.
I'm going to be apologetic and say something that is very dirty, and I'm from the Balkans, we are very direct. If she would go topless, she would get even more money, and that's not a good thing.
Unfortunately,
and
she's
please
not
don't
like
laugh
me,
at your daughter when this is being discussed.
But here she'd also be unemployed very quickly.
Exactly. So
That's what's called happy money.
happy money.
It's that human to human.
We're not getting into that kind of tipping in this panel.
That's next door. So that's next door if you want to go to that.
We're just tipping meet AI boyfriend, girlfriend.
Pete, if someone eats at Tiaco and doesn't tip, What do you do?
In 13 years, I think we've encountered this in a small handful of times. And for us, it's an indicator that something went wrong. It's not about the dollars. It's a red flag that somebody had an awful experience. Or culturally, every once in a while, it might not just match up, and that's fine. But I use it, much like your daughter, with data. And it's a great opportunity. I can tell you right now, we go through this every month. My staff averaged 24% tip average this past month. And so that lets me know that they're appreciated, right? So there is a data element to this. And I've followed some people out. And what's frustrating is when they say, how was everything? And they say it was fine. And then they leave a $0 tip. And I have to catch them in the parking lot and say, was everything all right? Is there something we can do better maybe? And they go, well, I didn't like the way that your host was dressed. And I was like, okay, great. So and whether you agree with them or not, there's a little bit of truth. We're here to serve our guests, and we take that information back and we do the best we can with it. So I look at it as data, not, and in most cases, it's not about the $5 or $10 that they were shorted, because that's, like I said, happens a handful of times in over a decade.
See, we're just exchanging glances with Hannah. They're sitting in the audience, and I think both of us couldn't remember a situation where we as Europeans back home would not give a tip. It does happen, of course at a smaller amount, not 22%, but I would still humbly say this: when everyone is paid well, and that is a given, and you expect that in all walks of life, then what you're saying is true. Then giving a little bit extra, because you got a little bit extra, works. All I'm saying as a European, I think this dynamic has kind of collapsed here. And it's not just about the good of the tipping, but sadly also the bad of the economy that needs to be solved by tipping, like you said, by charity.
I think an interesting question to ask yourselves is, do you think in a restaurant, someone who is better at the waiter or waitress job should get paid more than someone who doesn't?
Respectfully,
So
I'm going to
just saying,
challenge.
I think that's I'm not saying right or wrong.
No, it's a great
right?
question.
It's a question.
Yeah.
And I think it's one that you may think you know the answer to of how you would answer that. I think if you think about it, it may be more complicated than you think. And I think it's an interesting one. And think about that everywhere you go, not just in a restaurant, but think about it in Uber. Are they realizing that I do not want to talk today because I have, just think about it. Do you think in your DNA and yourself as a person, should they be compensated differently?
Respectfully.
It's an interesting question.
Respectfully, I agree with you on the question, but I need to challenge the whole premise of the question. We are not talking here about giving more for getting more. What we are talking here is that before all that happens, it is human dignity, the simple worker right that everyone is paid enough. And that, I think, is the fundamental difference between our side of the pond and that side of the pond.
And that's a different question and just as valid of a question.
Boy, do I light the fuse with 6 minutes?
Do it.
Sure,
All
let's
right.
do
I'm
it.
going to combine several cards here, and there's a little bit of mental editing here. To the extent that tipping derives from Reconstruction to keep minorities subservient as a vile practice, it's invaded mainstream America. Does our tipping culture worsen the power differential between workers and customers? You have to go last.
Can I read it?
There's several of these.
Just want to get the question right.
Oh, but I wasn't finished.
Oh, God. Oh, there's more.
Do workers feel compelled to take harassment just so that they don't alienate customers? And should we try to be more like Japan or learn from countries like Slovenia and Sweden who have high levels of mandatory employee benefits? We
that's a
touched
lot
on
of
a
questions.
ton of that, but there's your light the fuse. Let's go.
And I'm last.
So we have 6 minutes to answer all those questions?
No, you have like 2 minutes.
I
I just got lazy and I don't want to ask any more questions, so that one will take the rest of the time.
I think the most
Anyone-
interesting of that was, can you look at it quickly again? Does it increase the power differential between
Yes.
workers and owners?
Right.
I don't know the answer to that, but I think that's, to me, one of the biggest questions. That's probably the one that's most interesting to me But I don't think I'm necessarily the right person to answer. Does tipping affect that? So if more of your compensation is in tips and less from you as an owner of a restaurant, does that increase the power? Like, does that increase or decrease an employee's bargaining position with you as an owner for their hourly wage? Is that the right, for whoever asked that question, is that the right way to be thinking about it?
I think it's more about,
Okay, help me.
are you empowering the guest of the restaurant to be your employer for an hour? Is that more what you're talking about?
Yeah,
Because they're
it's-
paying
it's-
you
it's-
directly.
They're talking about, I
that the
believe, the
question?
tipper, not the employer.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Thank you.
if you're getting an hourly wage from your employer and you're getting an even greater amount from a guest or accumulation of guests, who are you who are you working for in that moment? Is that the question?
I think so.
You're working for the employer, right?
There were 7 questions there, to be fair.
Yeah.
May I
I'm
just,
going to jump into the Japan thing
Thank
real
I shouldn't
quick.
have done that, huh?
Japan's good.
Yeah,
Does
and
tipping culture worsen the power differential between workers and customers?
Oh, workers and customers.
May-
Sorry, I'm the problem.
May I jump in real quick and say this? Everyone here on this panel is super privileged. We are white, we are well educated, you know, we don't really have to have a problem with our lives for the most part. We have healthcare, we have schools. I would instead say this to the answer, because you see we've went into weird circles. I would gladly give the rest of my time and provide a platform for any server, especially somebody from, you know, a minority or a disenfranchised group, to come up, sit here on my space and tell the exact, concrete, real-life answer. And that's all I'm gonna say about this.
So the answer, I think,
And
To
please,
answer the
please just
question-
understand that my honorable colleague here just started talking. Instead, maybe somebody actually stood up. That's an invitation, seriously.
You have to come sit in Matija's seat. Come on up.
that's right.
Go ahead.
I think the answer is yes to the question. I thought you had asked between the workers and the owners. So whoever asked that question, that was I was struggling more with. Yes, I think the tipping culture has increased that discrepancy in terms of yes or no on that question.
Thank you.
Yep.
What do you think?
I'm going to take the Japan thing because I think it's really fascinating that tips it's one of the few places where it truly is an insult because they take so much pride in their work. And so to tip somebody in Japan is to say, it throws off the whole dynamic of why they're there and why they're doing what they do and the pride in which they take. So I would love it if we could wake up someday and have that kind of pride just show up in one interviewee, you know? And to be fair, we've had a number of people work for us that it was never about the money. It was about being able to make people happy. And so yeah, I think that to me is a great way to lead a country if we could figure out a way to get there. I would love it if we could do that. Does that answer the question on Japan?
I like that
Close
answer.
enough?
Yeah.
Japan
I
is
mean,
one of the least
and-
diverse countries out there.
And I think Matija would agree with you. That is a panacea, right? It's not where we are,
No,
but it
far
certainly
from it.
would be nice to get there where we are paying everyone a living wage. They're respected for what they do. And yeah, throwing money at someone is like someone sleeping on the street throwing money at them. It's taken the same way, right? Carl.
I mean, it's important to remember that the market speaks all the time. And we just went through a multi-year period where workers had all the leverage. You couldn't hire waiters. You couldn't hire dishwashers. And for our purposes on CNBC, that had huge implications on corporate profits and from the role of companies. They were the ones under the gun. So the pendulum will swing. And maybe we'll go the other way if the economy falters, or maybe if if we deport 10 million people, workers will have the leverage once again. But it's a constant free market discussion that happens 24/7.
The one thing I would say about Japan, because I remember during COVID, a lot of people also said, hey, the way that they responded to COVID there was amazing, right? How everybody got on board, everyone was wearing masks, like everybody got behind it so quickly. And it was kind of viewed as this, held up as an amazing way. Japan is one of the least diverse countries out there, and it's just something to think about when we compare the U.S. to Japan, and I think it's an important piece to remember.
So diverse people are the problem, you're saying?
When you look at
least.
any,
Least diverse.
least diverse. When you look at all the three usual top ways to define it.
We are going to wrap up with 1 minute each of closing thoughts. You hate these, don't you? Panelists hate this question, by the way. That's why I like asking it. 1 minute of closing thoughts each. Let's start with Carl and just work our way
Great.
down.
No, I just think, as I said in the beginning, it's a great debate because we're all the economic actor individually. It's not a household, it's not a corporate, it's us making a decision, often ad hoc, often by surprise. There's elements of emotion and rational economic thinking. So I don't think it's anything that will settle here on this panel, but having just traveled to Europe recently, to France, and especially where it's not a tipping culture, they're grateful for tips. I mean, they don't expect it, but if you give one, they are truly appreciative. And I think that kind of points to the human interaction element that you really are, you're sending a message through your gratuity. It might be, quote, charity, but it might actually be pure appreciation. And I think humans respond to that.
The purity of tipping. I like that. Yeah.
I just want to thank everybody for showing up. I know we had some stiff competition down the hall, AI and dating, but honestly, just the fact that this many people care enough about this topic to come up and listen to us, and I can be found most of the days at Tiaco, and one of the greatest things about my job is that I get to have conversations like this on panels like today's, but more importantly, every day I get to have one-on-one conversations, and I love learning from people in our community and figuring out what they want, because this model's broken and it's a train wreck that's eventually going to completely come off the rails, and we want to be at the very least slightly ahead of it. So I'm going to leave you with any Office fans in here? Oh, I just needed one, so yeah, thank you.
I declare bankruptcy?
I declare. No, a little Dwight Schrute quote that is, why tip someone for a job I'm capable of doing myself? I can deliver food, I can drive a taxi, I can and do cut my own hair. I did, however, tip my urologist because I am unable to pulverize my own kidney stones. And I feel like that might be something worth exploring as we think about the future of tipping and where we stand in this community.
That's a tip jar I don't want to touch.
Yes.
How do you follow
Why
that?
did we not end with Peter? I really like
I'm just
Frank.
thinking the same thing.
1 out of 5 stars, Frank.
Yeah.
1.
Well, that's up from the half I was about to.
Exactly.
Yeah, go ahead.
In the beginning of this, Peter said that Carl stole his notes, and then Peter just stole mine. So my main thing here is just to say thank you. This is my first time speaking at this conference. It's a really unique conference. I have spoken at a lot of conferences. I've moderated. I've attended. It is a very unique conference. And I think part of that, the two things I see the most as different is your engagement. Like, look at this. Like, I mean, this is insane,
Yeah.
right? Like, sometimes I go to things and I have to pay people to ask questions. I really do. I just spoke at an engineering conference. I had to pay people. I had to plant questions. So this is on you guys. Like, this is incredible. You're choosing to come and give your thoughts here, which is incredible. Secondly, also, like, you get to have debate up here. Like, you get to have people with different opinions, different backgrounds. Like, sometimes you go to these things and everybody looks, smells, and like they have the same perspective. They're all restaurant owners. They're all like, I've seen a lot of uniformity, and I think this is also we were given no notes up here. Like, I was not told I had to speak about anything. And again,
On
that is
purpose.
that,
On
right?
purpose. It's by design.
And that's a part
Nothing
of this
in advance.
conference, is that they want to be open discussion. And I just hope you guys appreciate how different that is from other things that are similar. So thank you.
That is great. And Matija, last word.
Please tip your servers. Please, when you see a homeless person, give him something. Acknowledge them. Say thank you. It is sometimes very hard You know, in a culture where just last night where we were taking the Uber home, and thank you the conference for providing the free lift ticket, then a tip had to happen. Of course, the guy clicked and it was something like, I don't know, 20% was $3. And then the question came, do we split it? $3 bloody, come on. Oh, you dirty capitalist. And I'm saying that with the biggest smile on my face, right? Because let me end
I've been
with,
in that Uber,
yeah. Let me end with this. I think we agree that tipping will stay and should stay because it's a nice thing to do. But I'm just hoping that you guys will be cognizant outside of the America-centrist bubble that there might be a slightly different way to run societies as well. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. You want to strive for the biggest innovation, to be the land of the free, the home of the brave, and the first in everything, which is all fine and well. But remember this, a resilient, strong economy is only possible if there is a resilient and strong society. And I want you, as you leave this door, to just by yourself think, is this society strong and resilient? What can you do yourselves to be just a tiny bit better? And I'm saying this humbly from a country of 2 million people where we have the highest number of volunteers per capita. You can do that too. Thank you very much.